Alright YouTube, what's up and welcome back to the channel. My name is Crypt13 and in today's video, we are going to be doing a build analysis for Arataki Itto. We're going to be going over his artifacts, some weapons, and some team comps. That's pretty much it. Let's just jump right into it. The thing is about Arataki Itto, his artifact set choices are relatively very straightforward. Your number one goal is to go for a 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams, as this is by far his best artifact set. Any other set is not going to be very good in terms of the damage output, but if you happen to have a set already farmed for him that's not the 4-piece Husk set, you can use it in the meantime as you farm a proper one. So your other options, for example, you can go with a 4-piece Bolide set, and what this is going to do is it's going to increase your shield strength by 35%, and while you are protected by a shield, gain an additional 40% normal and charged attack damage. So that normal and charged attack damage is pretty vital towards Arataki Itto's damage output because that's pretty much the basis of his damage and his kit. The shield strength is also pretty nice, so your shields definitely won't be breaking, especially if you run a Zhongli. However, if you use just crystallized reactions, a 35% increase in those crystallized shields is not too bad. Your other alternative is to run a 2-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams and a 2-piece Archaic Petra. This is going to give you the 30% extra defense and then also a 15% extra geo damage bonus. So if you happen to have 2 really good Archaic Petra pieces laying around, then you can definitely use that in the meantime while you search for another 2-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams pieces. Of course, you can use the Defender's Will for a temporary amount of time. However, again, your end goal is to hit that 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams. This is going to give you a 60% increase to your defense, which is pretty good, but when we actually take a look at the numbers, it's not that good. And we'll go over that in just a little bit here. So the problem with this is that it is a 4-star artifact and there's no 5-star equivalent of the Defender's Will. So you're going to be getting 4-star stats out of this. So you really want to avoid that on the Sands, the Goblet, or the headpiece because you're going to be getting lower stats. If you're going to be running the 2-piece, then you'll definitely want to have it on the flower so that you can just get less HP. The substats are also going to be lower quality. 4-star substats are lower and weaker than 5-star substats, so that's also something to keep in mind. This artifact set is just temporary. Your end goal is the 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams. Now, in terms of damage difference here, let's go back to the Bolide set. If you decide to run a Bolide set, the normal and charge attack damage difference between a 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams is only about 6% when we have Gorou buffs applied. However, when it comes to Ushi's damage, there's a massive 25% damage difference. Since Bolide only increases your normal and charge attack damage, and we get absolutely no extra defense bonuses here, that's why there's such a giant difference in Ushi damage when compared to the Husk of Opulent Dreams. All of the other options, when you do 2-piece Husk and 2-piece Archaic, or 2-piece Husk and 2-piece Defender's Will, it's about 10% difference. 10% for the Archaic Petra, and then about 12% for the Defender's Will. However, in my calculations, I did not take into account that we're using 4-star substats, so it's probably going to be closer to 12 or 14%. But yeah, the good news is that Arataki Itto artifacts are super straightforward. 4-piece Husk of Opulent Dreams is your goal, and you want to run defense percent on the Sands piece, geo damage bonus on the Goblet, and crit depending on what weapon you're running. Probably crit rate for most of his weapons like White Blind, Stone Thresher, and anything else that doesn't have crit rate on it, and then crit damage if you're running Serpent Spine. That's one of the very few weapons that actually has crit rate as its substat. Bottom line is just try to balance your crit stats so that you can have a healthy dose of crit rate and crit damage. And this makes a great segue into weapons, as we'll talk about what kinds of weapons you should be running on your Arataki Itto. First and foremost is his signature weapon, the Red Horn Stone Thresher. This weapon is pretty beastly, and it is his best in-slot weapon. It's pretty undisputed that this is going to be his top weapon. Next up is the Serpent Spine. This weapon is pretty good. At R5, it rivals the Stone Thresher pretty well. Then we have the White Blind, which is a free-to-play option for a lot of people, giving us a increase into attack and defense for 6 seconds as long as your normal and charge attacks hit. We have the Black Cliff Slasher. I do not have that weapon, but that is also an option. And then for 5 stars, you have the Unforged, Wolf's Gravestone, and Skyward Pride, all weapons that I do not own, but I get a lot of questions asking about their viability. And so I did some calculations here for Arataki Itto's weapons. The weapons are ordered in terms of their highest damage potential for normal attacks, for both crit damage and average damage. These calculations are just Itto's solo damage with 15% Geo Resonance damage bonus without the Geo Resistance and down effect, and also no Gorou buffs. If we decide to add Gorou buffs, then that can definitely change the Stone Thresher's damage output, because this is giving flat damage based on Arataki Itto's defense. So keep that in mind as we're taking a look at this. This does not include every source of buff available to Arataki Itto. Also, do know that this damage that I calculated is what his damage would look like for a practical rotation during his elemental burst. And now that Arataki Itto has been released, we have a more clear picture on what his burst rotation actually looked like. So if you watched some of my previous videos, I tried to predict what it might look like, and I got pretty close. I said that his combo would look like 2 normal attack combos, 10 charge attack combos, 2 final charge attacks, and then 1 Ushi. However, now in the final released version of Arataki Itto, what actually happens is we only get 8 charge attacks, but we can get 2 Ushis. So I was close, not exact, but considering how close I was, the damage that we calculated in those other videos was not too far off. So anyway, I went ahead and edited the rotation here. And do know that, you know, Arataki Itto's combos can vary wildly depending on how many stacks you have going in. So this is just what an average combo is going to look like. So okay, enough of that. Let's actually just get into the damage comparisons now. When ordered, these are his best weapons. Stone Thresher, Serpent Spine, R5, R3, R1. Those are all pretty much at the top, no matter their refinement. A White Blind R5, a Black Cliff Slasher with 3 stacks, a Wolf's Gravestone, a Black Cliff Slasher with 0 stacks, a White Blind R1, Unforged, and then Skyward Spine. That is the order of weapons when it comes to damage. But now let's take a look at the Serpent Spine R5 in particular. We'll use these graphs to kind of illustrate that picture. It is the second best, and when you take a look at these graphs, you can see that there is quite a large gap in between a Serpent Spine and a Stone Thresher, this red and blue bar here. The thing to note is that the normal and charge attack damage difference is really big when compared to just the final charge attack damage. And even when it comes to Ushi, Serpent Spine R5 actually does more damage. Serpent Spine R3 also does slightly more damage. So Ushi really does a lot of damage if you decide to use the Serpent Spine. This is probably because we don't get any flat damage bonus on our attacks from the Stone Thresher on our Ushi. So this is missing some extra damage because we don't get that buff on Ushi. But here, our normal and charge attacks, you know, when we do a lot of them at once, right? Because a full normal attack combo, that's 8 hits, and then of course 8 charge attacks. So that's quite a lot of flat damage that's being added into this rotation. And then here, since it's only 2, that flat damage is only added twice. So that's why the difference here is not as large and pronounced. So looking at the percent difference now, Stone Thresher and Serpent Spine R5, there's about 11.3% damage difference in our normal attack combo, doing 2 of them, 2 full ones, and then 8 charge attacks, there's about 9.5% damage difference, and then our final charge attack is about 2.5%, and then when it comes to Ushi, Serpent Spine actually does 5.5% more damage than the Stone Thresher. And then if you drop down to R1, we see a 20% damage difference with normal attack combos, 18.4% damage difference with charge attack slashes, 11.4% with the final charge attack, and then Ushi now does only 3.4% more damage than the Stone Thresher. So even at R1, Ushi still does slightly more damage than the Stone Thresher's Ushi. I find that to be kind of funny, actually. It's very interesting. That flat damage increase really does help out our normal and charge attacks. Without that, then I think Serpent Spine would actually be better than the Red Horn. Let's go ahead and move on to the White Blind R5, and you can see that the White Blind R5 over here is the orange bar, and yeah, that's quite a big difference. That is quite a large difference between the blue bars. So in terms of damage percentage, it's about 29.9, pretty much 30% in our normal attack combos, 27.85% on our charge attacks, 21 on the final charge attacks, and 13.3 on Ushi. So that's pretty large, and this is R5. So if you have just R1, that gap is going to be a little bit larger. I don't think I need to tell you that because this is already pretty massive. You'll definitely want to try and pick up a Serpent Spine and refine that a couple of times if you can. But, you know, if you are free to play, then this is the best that you're going to get. About 30 to 20% damage difference. If you take the average here, this is probably around 23%. Also, one thing to know about the white blind is that you might have a slightly different play styles in order to keep up your stacks. Because if you don't have full stacks from the white blind before going into your burst, that means you have to use a couple of physical attacks before you actually press your burst button. So that might take a little bit of time, and it might, you know, interrupt your flow a little bit. And it's something you have to be cognizant about if you're going to be using the white blind. Make sure that you have all of your white blind stacks before entering your burst, because it snapshots your defense. And then of course we have Wolf's Gravestone, the Unforged, and the Skyward Spine, because I got so many comments about these. But I'll go ahead and let the grass go ahead and do the talking for me, and you can see that the Wolf's Gravestone is worse than a White Blind R5, but it's a little bit better than a White Blind R1. The Unforged is just worse than a White Blind R1, and the Skyward Spine is also worse than a White Blind R1. However, the thing about the Skyward Spine is that it's going to give you energy recharge, which could help with your burst uptime. I think that this stack graph might give you a better picture. Here you can see the Wolf's Gravestone here, the White Blind R5 right here, and then the White Blind R1 right here. This here is average damage, so you can see Wolf's Gravestone kind of sits in between an R5 White Blind and an R1 White Blind, and then you can see here that the Unforged and the Skyward Spine are pretty weak. The Unforged and the White Blind R1, they are dealing about very similar amounts of damage. The Unforged does slightly more damage, actually. Very slight, but it's pretty much on the level of a R1 White Blind. Okay, and now let's go back to the Skyward Spine here, and it is definitely the weakest weapon out of all of the bunch. However, you trade that sacrifice and damage for energy recharge. If you're finding that you're having energy recharge problems with Arataki Itto, then Skyward Spine is not a bad choice. However, in my opinion, this is mostly going to come down to matchup. Against bosses or single target enemies where they don't drop a lot of elemental particles, energy recharge could be a problem. Or if you don't get energy because you improperly place your geo constructs so that they're not continually generating geo elemental particles for your Itto, then I can see energy recharge being a problem and Skyward Spine having merit to be used. But just know that the damage output on this weapon is incredibly low. However, if it means that you're going into your burst more often than these other weapons, then that can mean an actual DPS increase, even though the damage numbers itself are low. So these are Arataki Itto's weapons. I hope this helped you make a decision. Let's go ahead and move on to some of Arataki Itto's team comps. When it comes to Arataki Itto's teams, his teams are a lot more dynamic than some of the other team compositions in this game, because in my opinion, I don't think Itto has a one-size-fits-all team composition. A lot of the other characters in the game, they kind of just have a one-size-fits-all team, so you don't really have to swap your characters around very much. But for Itto, it feels a lot more pronounced. You're kind of switching out team members a lot more often. Now, when I say this, I am definitely referring to content a little bit more difficult, like the Abyss. If it's just the overworld, then you can definitely just get away with any kind of team comp, to be honest. So when it comes to that regard, yeah, you can definitely just run a one-size-fits-all team comp. Mono Geo, triple Geo with a flex element, etc, etc. So anyway, allow me to elaborate more on this dynamic team comp situation. What I mean by this is that depending on the matchup you're facing, you can either increase or decrease your damage output by swapping out certain party members in exchange for more survivability. Although this is a pretty applicable rule of thumb for any team comp, I just think it's more pronounced for Itto's teams. Itto's downtime after his elemental burst is very short. It's about 3 seconds only. After all of the hit effects, hit lag, and cast animations are done, there's only a 3-second cooldown left on his burst before he can activate it again. This of course assumes that you had enough energy to cast it off of cooldown, but regardless of that, it's only 3 seconds of cooldown. That means during that 3-second window, you very much want to minimize how much time you're spending using skills from your other characters. Because if you're spending more time using skills with other characters, you're spending less time with Itto doing massive damage with his elemental burst. And again, matchup dependent, and I'll talk about what those matchups are in just a little bit here. So the very core of Arataki Itto teams is definitely going to be Gorou, Albedo, and Zhongli. And you kind of swap these guys out depending on the matchup. So here's the thing about Zhongli. Zhongli's skills take a very long time to cast, whereas Gorou's and Albedo's are super quick. A very quick E-skill tap from both of these guys takes like half a second. However, Zhongli's hold E-skill, it takes about a second, maybe 1.5. And then his elemental burst is also a super long animation. So if you're taking time to use that, you're taking time away from using Arataki Itto's elemental burst. And Zhongli's damage output comes a lot from his elemental burst and not as much from his elemental skill. Albedo is more on his elemental skill and not his elemental burst. So in fact, if you're using Albedo, you probably won't even be using your elemental burst if Arataki Itto has his burst available. And the good thing for Gorou is that both his skills are very fast. His E-skill and his burst are super quick. So when would you take Zhongli? I think it's very obvious when you would take Zhongli, and it's in fights where you actually need a shield, where you need a strong shield because crystallized reactions aren't enough. So an example of a fight where you need a Zhongli shield is against the triple Kenkis, because it's basically impossible to dodge and iframe every single one of their moves. So you would bring Zhongli over Albedo here, sacrifice damage for more survivability here. So that right there is just one example of when you would bring Zhongli over Albedo. But if you're fighting matchups where it's just Hilichurls, they don't really do that much damage. Crystallize is going to work just fine there. So in that case, you would definitely take Albedo over Zhongli. Albedo is definitely going to provide you more off-field damage than Zhongli can. Arataki Itto, Gorou, and then you choose between either Albedo or Zhongli depending on the matchup. And then you have your final flex spot. Your final flex spot can be either Zhongli or Albedo again, or it could be a fourth Geo character like the Traveler. This is Electro Traveler, but pretend it was Geo. You also have Ningguang, or you can run a healer, or you can run an off-field damage dealer like Rosaria, Beidou, Raiden Shogun, Fischl. Fischl is another one if you have her at C6. So that could be your fourth flex spot if you decide to bring just triple Geo instead of mono Geo, where you would go like Arataki Itto, Gorou, Albedo, Zhongli. And the flex spot here needs to be the appropriate character for the matchup that you're facing. So I have another couple of examples of matchups where you have to edit your team comp. The first one is against the Rifthound enemies. Dodging all of their moves and trying to avoid the corrosion is almost impossible because you're going to have like 4 to 5 of these hounds attacking you at once. So getting those dodges and iframes off to be perfect is going to take a lot of work and a lot of effort. So a healer is definitely recommended against that matchup. So there, you definitely can bring someone like Bennett, Diona, Kokomi. Those are all solid characters to bring for that fourth flex spot if you need that healer. But again, I'll bring up this example. Against just normal Hilichurls, Samichurls, and maybe even Abyss Mages, you really don't need a healer. That's just my humble opinion. I think that you can get away with Crystallize and dodging. And then the third matchup is against shields. However, I was actually pretty surprised by this one though. Itto can shred enemy shields pretty well during his elemental burst. Here's an example against an Abyss Mage. It's not better than having the appropriate element to destroy it, but it's definitely pretty good. Still, I would recommend bringing the right element to deal with them faster. Albedo is also not great against shields because his elemental skill doesn't proc unless you deal damage, and you don't deal damage to Abyss Mage shields or Abyss Lector shields. So if you're going up against that matchup, your fourth spot should definitely be the correct element to take care of those. And then of course, there's just Bennett. Bennett does everything. Massive heals, massive attack boost, and he's got an element. He can take care of electrical shields and ice shields. So yeah, Bennett is just Bennett. Very solid fourth spot to use. And then what if you don't have Gorou? I got this comment a lot. People were suggesting, what kind of team comps can we run if you don't have Gorou? Then you should just go pull for him. Like honestly, just pull for him. Just get him. He's pretty vital. He's very vital to an Arataki Itto team. I'm kidding. Like, of course, I know since this game is gacha, you can't control who you get, and some people were unlucky and could not get a Gorou. If you don't have Gorou, then you can run something like Albedo Zhongli. Of course, these guys are 5 stars and not everyone's gonna have them, so then what's your choice after that? The first thing you need to check off is having a shield. 100% bring a shield so that you don't get interrupted during your charge slashes is definitely going to be necessary. So check off that shield box first. Diona, Toma, Zhongli, those are all very solid shield choices. So those are your first 2 slots, Arataki Itto and a shield. Your third slot can be another Geo character, Traveler, Ningguang, or it could be a permanent healer. Honestly guys, if you don't have Gorou, if you don't have Albedo, or if you don't have Zhongli, your team choices are kind of just whatever you want it to be. But I'll try to narrow down that list for you. Geo Traveler is good. Pretend this is the Geo Traveler. She has an ultimate skill that will increase the crit rate of your Arataki Itto as long as he's within the radius of the elemental burst. So a boost in crit rate is always super nice. Ningguang's E-skill will also give you a 10% geo damage bonus for 10 seconds. So walking through that screen while in his burst will give you a pretty nice boost. Although, since this is only 10 seconds, it won't overlap completely with the duration of his elemental burst. Your healer choice, Diona is really good. Kokomi is very solid. Not much else to say there. You know, if you want a healer, if you need a healer, those are definitely your choices. If you want a permanent healer, those are good. I would say, in my opinion, Diona might be a little bit better because her energy regeneration is a lot, especially if you run a sacrificial bow. If you do the hold E skill, you're getting about 10 particles. 10 particles is massive. And then for your off-field damage slot, you got a character like Fischl. If you happen to have her at C6, it's even better. But Oz can be pretty good as well. Raiden's E skill can also be pretty good. She also helps with energy regeneration if you're finding that energy recharge is a problem. Beidou is not a bad choice, but of course, in order for Beidou to battery herself, you need to be able to hit those perfect counters. So if you can't do that, then Beidou may not be the choice for you. Rosaria is a very interesting choice as well. She provides extra crit rate, and crit rate is always welcome. Rites of Termination is also a very solid elemental burst. Here we go. Don't hate me for this. Don't hit that dislike button. Well, you know what? Actually, I don't really care if you hit the dislike button because you can't even see it anymore. So you can use groupers as another character slot. Don't underestimate crowd control characters. Even though they don't actually increase Arataki Itto's damage directly, if you can group the enemies together and hit multiple at once, your damage is going to increase. So for example, if you're running double Geo only because you don't have Gorou and you have only either Albedo or Zhongli, then running a third slot where that is an element and then the fourth slot being either Kazuha or Venti, Swirl will be able to do its damage self-sufficiently because you have that third slot being another element so that you can actually swirl something. So again, it's not going to directly improve Itto's damage numbers, but if they're grouped up, you can hit multiple at once. And the really good thing about Venti, I don't have Venti, but I know that this is a thing. You can actually hit the enemies inside of Venti's vortex. Even though they get lifted up in the air, Arataki Itto's hitboxes actually reach high enough so that you can hit them. So yeah, don't sleep on Anemo if you don't have a Gorou, or if you don't plan to run triple Geo or mono Geo. Don't sleep on those Anemo groupers. Now, a couple of off-field damage dealers I did not mention were Xiangling and Xingqiu. And the reason why I don't mention these guys is because Xingqiu only triggers on normal attack hits. So when you're doing his charge attack slashes, the ranged swords will not activate and attack the enemies. You do get some extra resistance to interruption and damage reduction, but I just don't think he is as good as some of the other options that I mentioned. He's definitely usable though, out of some of the other characters. And then Xiangling, I think she's pretty hard to battery herself unless you have a massive amount of energy recharge, because Guoba will produce particles every time he spits out fire, and you don't want to keep Xiangling on the field too long, right? If you're playing Arataki Itto, you're playing Arataki Itto because you want to play Arataki Itto. You want to keep him on field as much as you can. So the fact that her E-skill doesn't generate all of her particles at once makes it a little bit hard to battery her. So unless you are running just massive amounts of energy recharge on your Xiangling might not be the choice. There we go. That is my Arataki Itto build video. And honestly, the most complicated thing about this character are his teams, because we just have so many different choices we can go with. His weapons and his artifacts are actually really straightforward, and I hope that this video helped you out. You know, if it did, don't forget to hit that like button, consider subscribing to my channel, and don't forget that I'm also on Twitch and Discord. Links to that are in the description below. And until next time, I will see you guys later.
Let's get down to business.
Let's light it up! Teamwork is strength!
Oh, you're coming through! There! Finally! To the ferry! Let's get down to business! Charge! Burst forth! Everyone on me! It's showtime! Attaboy! Let's get down to business. Coming to be! Rally! Who wants some of this? Finally! Can't catch me! Let's roll! The ferry! Finally! To the ferry! Let me try. Advance!
Let's light it up!
This! This isn't over, Chief! Fall in!
Everybody stand back!
Everyone on me! Burst forth! Oh, coming through! You! Bam! Cut down!
Let's light it up!
Let's roll! Live!
Yeah!
Bam! Fall in! Can't catch me! Burst forth!
Going in!
Press the advantage! Who wants some of this?